Good evening, a good moed. Hope all of you are doing well. Tonight we're learning Maseches Shekalim, Daf Tet. As well, we'll be learning approximately half of Daf Yomi and Aleph, trying to chip away a little bit at a time. The blot are just sometimes complex, and they're always very long. And then in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow, we'll push to get to the bottom of Yud Aleph and Yud Beis. That could be feasible. Yud Aleph and Yud Beis is a shorter blot, shorter Amud, I should say. Let's get started so everyone can make Marav on time. We are on the bottom of Chesed and Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. Yesterday, we made reference to the shiur of a revis. And tonight, we're going to learn some of the halachos, some of the infrastructure parts of the halacha as to how we would measure such things. It says the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Chanan Luga. A lug is a measurement from the Torah. Lug, and our revis is a revi'is halug. So when we speak about revi'is for the purposes of kiddush, for the purposes of dalikosos, so that is going to be 1/4 of this. So the Meforshim say that if you were to take a lug and then you divide it into 4 equal parts, one of those cups would then be a revi'is. A revi'is, 1/4 of that volume. So says the Gemara, Luga do Raisa. How do you measure that? It's based on the tmunta atika. The tmunta atika was a measurement, and again, you'd have to divide it by 4 to get to a revi'is. It was itself a lug, 4 revi'iyos. And that was something that was used back in the day. Dimuraisa de Tzipori was used as a measuring cup for fish brine in the city of Tzipori. People had this wisdom as well to base Rabbi Yanai in the times of Rabbi Yanai, because have a mechilin badvash, they would measure honey with that as well. Skip 2 lines. We're starting now with the second line, or continuing the second line on Testament Aleph. Atika mean begin to have a biome. Why are you calling it ancient if you were using it in your day? You just said, like, wow, they use it to measure honey in my city. That's not ancient anymore. That's still today. So why are you using the word ancient? So answers the Gemara, East de Amre de Havas Zeira Verapsa. Some say that it used to be a smaller amount and it was increased over the years. East Amre de Zeira, that when it was made smaller, from one generation to the next, it wasn't actually made smaller in the right way. So we would still refer to it as the ancient measure, but it wasn't exactly correct in the way it was being used in the times of Rabbi Yanai. The real one was really the Tmunta Atika, that's what it was referred to, and it was a perfect, again, it was your prototype of how to measure out a revis by having a log, which is 4 revi'os. Kama hava shiur shelkos, how much is the actual volume of the cup? We saw this in a somewhat complex Gemara in Maseches Psachim. There we learned a little bit differently than we're going to see here. 5th line, Daf Testament Aleph, Rabbi Yossi b'shem ben Pazi, Rabbi Yossi bar Bibi b'shem Rav Shmuel, a lot of Rabbi Yossis. What do they all say? Here's the volume. Here's how you would create a container that would hold a perfect revis. Etzba'ayim, al etzba'ayim, 2 finger breadths by 2 finger breadths. Al rum, etzba, at the height of 1 etzba, umechza, 1.5, ushlish etzba, and 1/3 of an etzba. So that's approximately 1.8, give or take. So it's 2 by 2 by 1.8 finger breadths. The problem with this is, if you remember what we learned in Psachim, is that we gave a different volume. We said over there it was 2 by 2 by 2.7 finger breadths, and here it's 2 by 2 by 1.8 finger breadths, so the numbers don't stim. So some of the Meforshim and Psachim indicate by the Balei Tosfos, they're right, that maybe this volume was in a cylinder shape, and maybe the volume over there in Maseches Psachim was in a rectangular shape, a cuboid shape, where it has length, it's all in with sharp right angle corners, but here it might be a circle, so there's more area, more volume, I should say, in a cylinder than there would be in a similar diameter of a rectangle. Either way, this is the way we would measure the revis. Says the Gemara after the parentheses, 7-8 lines down. Rabbanan de Kesari, Rabbi Yossi bar Bibi b'shem Shmuel. These the rabbis of Kesar of Kesari and Rabbi Yossi bar Bibi said, "Asa the Rav Nasan ki Rav Shimon." There's a shita of Rav Nasan that is like the shita of Rav Shimon. What are each of these shitas? Kimad de Rav Shimon Amar b'Revis, just like Rav Shimon says about a revis. Kain Amar Rav Nasan b'Revis l'chashe yikrash v'hebo kezayis. What happens when wine congeals, when it dries out a little bit and it becomes kind of like a jello type of substance? So then we stop measuring in revi'iyos. Then we turn our measurement over to a solid measure, and that would be that of a kezayis. And that's seemingly Rav Shimon and Rav Nasan both seem to agree with that. V'hebo kezayis. Gemara tells a story. Reb Simon ben Rabbi Yeshua b'shem Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that he tells Reb Simon, these names are not all, they're always important, but they're especially important tonight because we're going to come back to each of these names. Reb Simon said in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Ma'aseh b'Pirdas Rebbe, the story of the mule of Rebbe Shemesa. The animal died, and some blood had exited the body when it died. V'tiaru es dama mishum nevela. And here it seems to be that they were mitaher the blood as it relates to its status of being a nevela. The animal wasn't nevela; it wasn't just the way it died. So therefore, the animal has normally has tumah. The basar has tumah, but the dam that exited, that doesn't have tumah. The Shah, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Simon. Rabbi Simon was the one who told the story about this. He quoted this halacha. So Rabbi Eliezer, look at Rabbi Simon. He was sitting there. He said, okay, thank you for telling me the story. Ad kama, what is the shiur? Up to what volume of blood can exit the body before we trigger a tumah of nevela? What does it take? Velo ashkach, but he ignored him. What do you mean he ignored him? That's very strange. Fine. So Rabbi Eliezer was frustrated, as the Gemara will say explicitly in a line. But he said, in the meantime, he's like, well, fine. If Rabbi Simon was quoting in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, I'll just go to the mouthpiece. I'll go to the person who actually said it. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So then Rabbi Eliezer went to the person who actually told the story to Rabbi Simon. He went to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and said, Amarle ad revi'is tahor. And he answered the question. He said, if there's an amount of blood that comes out of this animal, the pirda, the mule of Rebbe that died and some blood came out, up to a revi'is. Once a revi'is of blood has exited the body, then that blood would then have the status of tumas nevela. Big nafkaminas. We have to make sure we understand how to measure the volume. That's why this is coming right here on the heels of our measurements of 2 by 2 by 1.7, or by the tumunta atika, whatever the measuring tools are. We need to know what that is, because there are massive nafkaminas in regards to tumah v'tara and regard whatever. We have to figure these things out. So that's what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says that Kama v'lo ashkach be, and then Rabbi Shimon Levi said, "Amalei ad revi'is tahor yoser me revi'is tamei." So this is a problem in the Gemara. What about a revi'is itself? What about an exact measurement of a revi'is? That's like kind of reading between the lines here. They didn't say either of them. Ad revi'is is tahor. When it's more than a revi'is, so which one? What is about a revi'is itself? So okay, the Gemara doesn't say that. I think we could probably guess on our own that once we hit the revi'is mark, you're already in another category, and there's probably tumah there as well. Ubash, the Rabbi Eliezer, he was frustrated toward Rabbi Simon, al delo chazar le Rabbi Simon shmuasa, that he never gave him an answer. And similarly, Rabbi Habayasi, Rabbi was in the base medrash, Masne Hadein Uvda, and he was repeating over the story. Amar le Rabbi Yitzchak bar Kahana. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Kahana looks at Rabbi and says, you just quoted this story about the mule of Rabbi that died. Can you please give me pshat? Ad Rabbi is tahar yoser mikan tameh. He was guessing. He didn't know the answer. He said, should I assume that I'm correct in the assumption that if the blood that comes out of the mule, of the nevela, is less than a kazai, is less than a revis, that's going to be considered tar. But if it's more than a revis, it's going to be considered tameh. Uba'atbe. And then again, what's going on with this story? Why is everybody ignoring? So Rabbi Eliezer first was snubbed by Rav Simon. And now in this story, it happened again, where Rav Yitzchak bar Kahana was asking a question to Rabbi. He also, he shooed him away. He said, don't ask me any questions. So someone in the base medrash was watching this interaction. Amar le Rav Zerika. Rav Zerika said to Rav Bibi, why'd you do that? Begin to sha'ilach abad. He asked you a question. What are you kicking him away from the desk for? Just answer his question. What is the problem? So no, Rav Bibi, his mind was elsewhere. Amar le, begin to lo halas daiti bi. Because I wasn't myself. I've been off my rocker today, says the Gemara. I pushed him away. What was going on in Rav Bibi's world? He was having some hashkafa challenges with his finances. The Amar of Chanan, the pasuk says, that the pasuk says that it's as if your life hangs in the balance. What is this? What does this pasuk refer to? And the Gemara has a drasha a little bit more than a third of the way down on Testament Aleph. The drasha is that's a person who buys enough wheat for the entire year. That person has, we know he knows that his life is in the balance as it relates to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem provides all our parnasa. The pasuk continues, a person is going to be fearful day and night. That's a worse stage. That's a person who only buys for a couple of days. That person, they're constantly in fear. Am I going to be living past next week? We shop in our family once a week. We go to Jewel, we stock up. So that's this category of sidki. He's buying from the merchants. You're not even going to believe in your own life. That's a person who goes to the bakery every day to get food. That's all the money that they have. Their life is entirely dependent on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's not good. It's better to buy for the year than it is to buy for the week, and than it is to buy for certainly for the day. And I've been relying, says Rav Bibi, I've been relying on the paltar, on the daily rations that I would buy from the baker. So I'm just very stressed out about this, that I'm not able to make the expenditures that I need, and it's hard for me. So therefore I was distracted, and therefore I pushed away Rav Yitzchak bar Kahana, who came to ask me this question. Okay, fine. Umau Kidun, what is in fact the halacha when in regards to dam revi'is? So it says the Gemara, here's the brayta. Hey, Eid, Rabbi Yoshua ben Pesora, Rabbi Yoshua ben Pesora. Again, this is a brayta. That's important to note that because it's going to come up in a few minutes. Hey, Rabbi Yoshua ben Pesora, al dam nevela shu tahor, my tahor mila hashir. Different than our initial understanding. Rabbi Yeshua ben Pesor in the Brisa writes that when it comes to dam nevela, and we say that it's tahor, it's not tahor as it relates to making things tameh from nevela. It's only tahor in that it is not something that can cause for the transfer of tuma. We know, of course, we've learned dozens of times throughout Shas this principle of liquids being a machshir tuma to make tuma transfer from one item to another. So there has to be a liquid medium of yad shachadam, yayin, dvash, shemen, chalav, tal, mayim, and dvash or dam, whichever one I didn't say, I don't remember. The two daleds of yad shachadam is dvash and dam. So here, that's the dam here, is that this dam, normally we'd say that blood is a machshir, it can transfer tuma. But says the Gemara, quoting a Bryce, the name of Rabbi Shua ben Pesora, the dam of a nevela is tahor milahachshir. It's not able to transfer tuma. But against our initial havamina, like we thought that, no, it's up to a revis of liquid, of dam, that it's just not metame bichlal. Forget about tumas machshir. It's not machshir. We're not even talking about that. But here, Rabbi Shua ben Pesora turns the page on us and says about latamos metame. At any shiur, it seems to be that the blood would be metame. So it says the Gemara, that can't be. We're halfway down on Daf Tes Amud Aleph at the words Taman Tanina, smack in the middle of the page. It says the Gemara, Taman Tanina, we have a brisa elsewhere. And that brisa shows us that what you just said, Rabbi Yoshua ben Pesora, can't be true. You said that there is the dam of the nevela, which is not able to be machshir tuma. It cannot function as a liquid to transfer tuma, and its blood is also tameh. But that doesn't work because we have a brisa that says that those parameters are only true by sheretz. Says the brisa, dam hasheretz kibisaro, that the dam of the sheretz is like its batzar in that it's metame ve'eno machshir. So we see that it can cause tuma, but it's not able to be machshir, to cause liquid, to function as a liquid to transfer tuma from one thing to the next. Ve'ein lanu kayotzebo, and not only that, that's the only story. It's the only Cinderella story. That's this case right here, that the dam hasheretz is the only scenario where the blood is metame like the meat, and it's not a machshir. But we just tried to say that was pshat in our case of the dam nevela. So that doesn't make any sense. It should be that the only place that this halacha exists is by the dam sheretz. But that's not what it says here in our Gemara of Rabbi Yoshua ben Pesora. Wanted to say that was also true of dam nevela, not only of dam sheretz. So it says the Gemara, this is not a strong contradiction. Rabbi Yoshua ben Pesora can keep his answer because, and there's a slight change in the gears of the Gemara, it's kishir, or this year, there's like a whole bunch of options here. A kishir tumaso shadamu metame b'kibasar. No. The ein kayotzebo doesn't mean that there are no other halachic scenarios where you could have blood be metame like it's basar, but not have the capacity to transfer tuma. And it can still happen by dam nevela as well. What was the ein kayotzebo here? That was just saying there's a uniqueness by dam hasheretz that the shiur tumaso shadamo metame kibasaro, that with a very small shiur, that the basar can be metame, so too can the dam be metame, the tuma of the sheretz. So just a unique exclusionary din that applies over there. In short, we have two approaches here. We asked, what does the dam of nevela do? So approach number one we saw on the top of the page is that less than a revi'is of dam is not metame at all. More than a revi'is of dam is metame. The second approach of Yeshua ben Pesora was that we have a shtickl chiddush, which is that the blood is metame in any shiur, seemingly in any shiur, and it is not a machshir. It cannot cause tuma to transfer from one food to another. We're almost 2/3 of the way down, a little bit higher on the page than that. Amar Rabbi Yossi, pligi batrei amoraim. There is in fact a machlokes amoraim lemaisa, because we saw there's two approaches in the Rishonim. How do we treat the blood of a nevela? So here's the machlokes: chad amar tamei v'chad amar tahor. One says that the blood is taka tamei, the other says that it's tahor up to a particular shiur. Manda amar tamei Rabbi Yehuda, the shita who holds that the blood is tamei, that's like the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Manda amar tahor Rabbi Yeshua ben Pesora. The one who says that it's tahor seemingly is like the shita that we just saw in the brisa a few lines above in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Pesora. Amar lei Rav Avduma mi dimin nechusa. But yo, Sivir Rabbi Yehuda moraina debei nesiyahava. We know that this is correct about Rabbi Yehuda. He paskin that way in regards to the Beinesiya. And whose mule was it? It was Rebbe's mule. So he was the posek, he was one of the dayanim in town, and he paskin down the shayla, and he paskin the chomer that it was tamei. So we see over here that that's Rabbi Yehuda is definitely l'shitaso, and this machloket in the Amoraim is now matched up perfectly. That we said chad amar tamei, chad amar tahor. So the one that says tamei is Rabbi Yehuda, and that matches with our story that we saw on the top of the page. That brings us to the two dots, 2/3 down on Daf Tes Amud Aleph. Let us continue. We said in our Mishnah that one should be above the fray in regard to the possibility of any geneva, any possible stashing of coins on their body. So that's what we saw in the Mishnah the other day, and we said that people have to really try it and do their best. So let's see a little bit more nuance here in the Gemara. Tani, Rabbi Shmuel says, kavatz, a person who has long locks of hair, kavutzosav taltalim, that's where the word comes from. It's talking about long braids or long locks of hair. Lo yitrom mipnei hachashad. he should not be the one who goes into the lishka, because you could stick money into the dreads in your hair, into the thick braids in your hair, and then that would be a problem. So he should not do it. Tani hagizbaran hayu mefasfasin bekilkin. They would look between the fibers of our clothes, are very finely woven. Our problem is that we have pockets everywhere. My suit jacket has 10 pockets on it. It's easy to stash things. So their garments were much more simple in that way. They just had to make sure that there were no. Basically, it's the old version of frisking, just to make sure that it was clear that there was nowhere to hide anything. Tani midbarin midabrin hayu imo misha shehu nichnas ad shashiyot, and they wouldn't stop talking to him the whole time, asking questions back and forth, talking and learning, because they didn't want him to stick things in his mouth. That's how contraband has been sold all over the globe. Swallow it. So it says the Gemara, we didn't want that to happen. Why didn't we put water in his mouth? Very difficult to, that's not so pasha. You have to put water in his mouth, and let's say they picked a particular shiur, you have to spit back the water in the cup when you get out. So it'd be a great way to make sure that he doesn't swallow anything. Good. So the Gemara, we can't do that, because what we are doing is hafrashas truma. And when we do hafrashas truma, you have to make a bracha. Amar Rav Tanchuma, mipnei habracha, asher kedushanim mitzvot savitzivanu, lahafrish truma. And therefore, you couldn't put water in your mouth. You're not allowed to have anything in your mouth when you make a bracha. That's halacha l'maisa. So let's say, for example, you're eating a food. You have gum in your mouth, and you're now have to make a shahakol on another drink that you didn't anticipate to drink. You're not allowed to keep the gum in your mouth. You have to take it out of your mouth, make a bracha, and then put it in. But some people, this comes up a lot. I know for myself and others who sometimes need a cough drop during davening. Not when you're saying the words Baruch Atah Hashem. Really, not during davening at all if it's avoidable, because the language is there's another pasuk. Mali Birkas Hashem. Which one? Can't remember. There's a pasuk that has a direct reference to this, and I can't remember which one it is. The point is that when we make a bracha, we should not have food in our mouth. So they couldn't put water in his mouth because he had to make a bracha. Even if he could stick it to the side of his mouth and gargle out a bracha, it wouldn't have been appropriate. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yonasan, he points out that the idea that we saw in our Mishnah is also validated b'Torah v'Nuvim u'Viksuvim. Matzana she'adam tzarich l'tzeis but yedei habrios kederach shehu tzarich l'tzeis yedei hamakom. People should strive that they should be yotze with the brios, that they should be above the fray with the creations of the world, just like they should be above the concerns of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We should strive for both. So some people are kanaim for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but they're not kanaim for people. Some people are kanaim for people, but not for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Neither of those are correct. We should be trying to strive for excellence in both. It doesn't mean pandering. It doesn't mean to be spineless. It doesn't mean to do what everybody asks you to do. You should be super yashar and super erlich, so nobody has any questions about you. The Torah minayin, what's the pasuk of the Torah? We saw this in our Mishnah. What about a Nevi'im? The Nevi'im minayin, 5 lines before the end of the parak, before the end of the halacha. The Nevi'im minayin dechsiv kel elokim Hashem Yisrael hu yada. And what about in ksuvim minayin dechsiv umasachem v'seichel tov b'nei elokim ve'adam. Gamliel Zuga, 3-way machlokas in regards to what Gamliel Zuga means. Is that his name? He's from Zug, or was he a person who worked with scissors? Zug in the Gemara language, it's scissors, or was he a zug, like one of the zugos? So we don't know exactly who this is referring to. So a Gamliel Zuga, Shah Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Bon, Ezehu hamechuvar shebekulam. Which pasuk really is the most correct of them all? Which one encapsulates everything? Answers the Gemara to finish up this section. Amar Levi Simnikim Me'Hashem U'Yisrael. That pasuk is the one that is most inclusive. Again, there's plenty of room for drasha here. This is an Omer Dorsheni. Why was the question asked and why was the answer given the way that it was? Ayin Sham and all the Sfarim to see what possibilities there were. Halacha Gimel, 10 lines from the bottom of the page, Tetzimot Aleph. We saw this previously, that Rabban Gamliel always wanted to make sure that his coins were actually used for the truma. So what he would do is he would hold it in his hands in a way where they could see, kind of like between his fingers, so that people could see he wasn't holding anything else. And he would toss it in front of the gizbar who was standing there. And he would make sure that Rabban Gamliel's coins got pushed into the actual kupa, so that actually his money was going to be used when the hafrashas truma took place, and they'd actually be buying animals. We don't do any truma until the gizbar says out loud to the people in charge of the Beis Hamikdash, should I do the truma? To Rome. 3 times. We want you to do the truma, the hafrashas truma. Why 3 times? Well, this is found in a number of places in Shas, this idea of repetitive comment in order to indicate your intent. That yes, we want you going in that room, and we're going to say it 3 times. It's another check in the system to make sure that everything is yasha. So he had to say it 3 times. Shalosh pe'amim tara mesarishona v'chipa bekatablios. There were 3 times that there were monies taken out, and they would, after the first one, they would v'chipa bekatablios, they'd cover it with sheets of leather. Hasheni chipa bekatablios. Then they would take from the second truma later in the year, and then they'd cover that with katablios, with sheets of leather. Hashlishi lo ha'mechap. And the last one they did not cover. Why was there any coverings at all? Because when you took from the first time of the year to the second time of the year to the third, we had to make sure that all of the monies were separated properly. Because Shema Yishkach v'Yitrom mean hadavar hatarim. That when you do the second giving, the second time you come in to do afresha, we don't want you to take from the first year's giving, from the first giving of that year. So we had to put the leathers in there to make sure that there was a separation between them. Tarim esarishona l'shem Eretz Yisrael. We're going to qualify this piece more in the Gemara, but the Mishnah says that when they did the first truma at the beginning of the first time of the year by Shavuos, so then by Pesach, excuse me. So then what they would do is they do it for the sake of Eretz Yisrael. V'ashniya l'shem krachim hamukafin la, the cities that were close by, the countries that were immediately surrounding. V'hashlishis l'shem Bavel, l'shem Madai, l'shem Medinos harechokos, top of Testament base. The third time that we would give, which would be by Sukkot, that would be with intent for the whole world. Shel Beis Rabban Gamliel, the Gemara says, what was this whole shtick that was going on with Rabban Gamliel and the Gizbar, that he'd have to make sure that his coin was actually inside the kupa? What is the big deal? Ilu hayu shnei karim v'tara me'echad mehem al chavero shema lo patar chavero. What does that even mean? Like if I give my meiser, then everything else has been treated already. And if Rabban Gamliel's coin is not part of the truma itself, he's going to be yotze with all the korbanos. So what is the big deal? Why were they doing this? It says the Gemara, third line, hanachas ruachi lahem shelo yehei korban miskari vel mishel henchila. That's their own thing. It wasn't a halachic requirement. Otherwise, we'd be in big trouble because there were shirayim. There were always extra coins that didn't make it into the cut. But halachically, even if your coin was sitting in the shirayim and the leftovers of all of the coins in the lishka, you were still yotze as long as your money made it to the lishka. Good, you were yotze. But this was not a halachic requirement; it was their own desire. Tani, the Brisa writes, "Shama tesakatavios nasu kulan shiraim." If the sheets of leather that were separating one giving from the next giving, if the sheets fell off, then everything in the container then became shiraim, and they would not be using it anymore for the giving. It would remain shiraim. There might be a use for it, as we'll see in a moment. But that was the din, that the leathers that they used to separate one section from another, if it fell down, then it was all shiraim. Tani, the Brisa also writes, Shalishis he paisa ashira shebekulan. The third giving was the one that always had the greatest amounts of coins. Shahayuba isterios shel zahov, the darkonos shel zahov. These two different types of gold coins, they were always found to be, because you're traveling from further, so you have to kind of ramp up your volume that would all be included under one coin. And these coins were very, very valuable. The dugma, instead of taking all the pennies, you scaled up to nickels. That's fine when you're moving from, from Syria to Yerushalayim. But if you're moving from Chicago to Yerushalayim, you're not going to want nickels, and you're not going to want dimes, you're not going to want quarters, you're going to want Bitcoin, you're going to want something else, you're going to want something much more valuable, gold, whatever it is. So the further they were coming from, the more valuable the coins were. So the third giving of the year, the one that came in for the Chutz La'aretz people, that was always of the wealthiest of the givings. Tani, the Brisa also writes, Tar Mitzvah Rishonos L'Shem Eretz Yisrael U'L'Shem Kol Yisrael. This Brisa qualifies our Mishnah. It said in our Mishnah that the Truma was done for the sake of everyone in Eretz Yisrael. What about the rest of the world? That you can only say for Eretz Yisrael. And the Brisa here just corrects. It didn't mean only that. It's also L'Shem Kol Yisrael. Shniya. The second giving was L'Shem Krachim HaMukafin, yes, to the cities that were close by, but also L'Shem Kol Yisrael. V'Ashlishis, and the third giving of the year by Sukkot was L'Shem Bavel U'Madai, L'Shem Medinos Harechokos, L'Shem Kol Yisrael. That it wasn't done stam. It was always done with the intent of all of Klal Yisrael, because the Afresh had to include them. You had to have them in mind, like we'd say by Kiddush, that I'll have all of you in mind. This is like a regular thing at our Friday night tables. Anybody want to make Kiddush? I'll have you in mind. We do this all the time. This is like Ma'asim B'chol Yom. So we always try to keep them in mind. And here too, it wasn't an exclusionary comment of the first giving that was done by Pesach is only for the Bnei Eretz Yisrael, the second one's for the local countries, and the third for the far people. No, it was always L'Shem Kol Yisrael. Brisa, 10 lines down. Tani, natal mina rishona, afal pi sheyesh b'rishona, notal mina shniya. Once you've already given from the first, let's say you've given by Pesach, so then even though there's leftovers from there, but you'd already purchased what you needed, but there's still leftovers from the first allotment, it doesn't make a difference. When it comes to Shavuos, notal mina shniya. There you're still going to take from the second bucket. That's what you're supposed to do because it's the second giving of the year. Notal mina shniya, afal pi sheyesh b'shniya, notal mina shlishis. And the same would be true on Shavuos, that once you've taken from there, if there's any leftovers, we don't use those when it comes to the Sukkot giving, to the Sukkot truma there, we take from the third container. What about Shalma Shlishis Chozer L'Shniya? What if you you run out of the third bucket, okay, then you can go back to bucket number 2 that was given on Shavuos, and you can use that. Shalma shniya chozer l'rishona. And if you finish the second bucket for that third slot, then you can go back to the Rishona, no problem at all. You can use all of those coins. And then we have a machlokas. What if you really ran out of coins? You're coming up to Sukkot, and you don't have enough korbanos to get through the Chag. So what are you supposed to do? You ran out of coins. All that's left is the shirayim. So that's the machlokas in the Tanaim. Here's the Tanakama. We're about a quarter of the way down, almost a third of the way down Testament base. Says the Gemara, Shilmu shlashtan. You finished out all 3 containers. There's nothing left in the actual boxes. Chozer b'shokel. You got to go back to the people and say, I'm sorry, we didn't have enough money for this year. You guys have to give another chatzi shekel. Rav Meir says absolutely not. Rav Meir Omer, and this is l'shitasa because we saw this earlier in the Masechta. Rav Meir Omer chozer l'shirayim, that you are allowed to utilize the shirayim. Shahayir Rav Meir Omer moalim b'shirayim shamit tzarchu lehen b'sof. What was he of the opinion of? That there's still me'ilah by shirayim. Well, if there's me'ilah by shirayim, then they must be kodesh. There must be some status of kedusha there. And if there's some status of kedusha, then if push comes to shove, you're allowed to use the shirayim for the sake of buying korbanos. This brisa we're about to learn is one of the most famous brisas in all of Shas. It's the brisa which is the root for. It's also quoted in other Masechtas. This brisa is the root for the Mesilas Yesharim, and it's referred to as the brisa of Reb Pinchas ben Yair. And when it says v'chein here, and similarly, it's not attaching itself immediately to the lines prior. And again, this is sometimes the choppy nature of Shekalim, is that this is going back to a different part of our Mishnah, which was that you need to be above people's criticisms. So it says, how do you get there? V'chein hai Reb Pinchas ben Yair omer, zrizus mevi l'idei nekius, that a person having zaris, having some fire in their belly, that will lead them to nekius. Nekius, in the terms of the Mesilas Yesharim, is to make sure that you're nucky from avera. Nekius mevi l'idei tahara. Once you've reached that rung, so then when you've done that, then you can get to the level of tahara, where you're mamash tahor. This is what we say, taharenu on Shabbos when we daven, that we should try to have a level of tahara. And tahara mevi l'idei kedusha, and that's a whole nother level. That's mekadesh atzmecha v'muter lach. That's called kedusha, is where you separate. That's machlokas rishonim. Is kedusha sanctity, or is kedusha being mavdil, separating yourself? So here, this is where you're mavdil from some of the things that are worldly. Again, within reason, we're not those who shun the pleasures of the world. At the same time, there's a place for some degree of extra discipline. And kedusha, when you're on that level, maybe anava. Once you're on that level, there could be some level of anava. But on all of the lower levels, there is no anava yet. This is a ladder after all. You can't skip rungs. Anava mevila de yiras chet. That's terrifying. The only time you have yiras chet is when you're on level 6, level 7. That's very far up the chain. Yiras chet mevila de chasidus. And yiras chet leads to this very, very lofty level of chasidus, a closeness with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Chasidus mevila de ruach hakodesh. And when a person's on that level, look what you've accomplished so far. You have no averas, you have tara, you have kedusha, you have anava, you have yiras chet. These are lofty levels that leads to ruach hakodesh. And then the peak of the human condition is that someone who has ruach hakodesh mevila de tchias hamesim. And these are the stories in Tanakh that we saw with Eliyahu and Elisha, all these wild stories. These people reach these levels. We see the roadmap. This is how we do it. And the Ramchal, in his Sefer, he details how to get there. That's the crazy part. And if a person were to be on such a level, then they would be able to be mevi alidei Eliyahu zechor lato. And then the Gemara goes to quote a pasuk to teach you how we shift from each rung of the ladder. Not so much how, but much as what are the Mari Makomos. The reason is Mevili de Nekiyos Dechsi v'Kilam Mechaper, based on the pasuk Nekiyos Mevili de Tara Dechsi v'Chiper Aleh Kohen v'Tahira, after Kapara, which is Nekiyos. There's no Averas. That's Nekiyos. Then you can get to Tara. Tara Mevili de Kedusha Dechsi v'Tiara v'Kiddusha. The pasuk has both words in the same pasuk. Kedusha Mevili de Anava Dechsi v'Kiko Amar Ram v'Nisa Shochein Ad v'Kadosh Shemom Rom v'Kadosh Eshkon. So the pasuk there speaks about how you can get from kedusha to anava. Both of those are referenced here. You have a kadosh in one part of the pasuk and dako shval ruach in the end. Anava mivili de yiras hachet. How do you get from anava to yiras hachet? T'chsiv ekev anava yiras Hashem. Famous pasuk. Yiras hachet mivili de chasidus. How do you get from yiras hachet to chasidus? T'chsiv, because the pasuk right v'chesed Hashem eolam ve'ad olam al yireyav. The chesed chasidus can be to yira, as that pasuk indicates. Chasidus mevila de ruach hakodesh. T'chsiv az yibartu bechazon chasidecha. You have a chazon, which is to be a seer. Chasidecha is chasidus. Ruach hakodesh mevila de tchias hamesim. T'chsiv anasati ruchi bochem v'chayisem. You have that level of ruach hakodesh, ruach and v'chayisem. Tchias hamesim mevila de l'yal zuchor lotov. T'chsiv hinei anochi sholech lachem. It's Eli Anav Lifnei Yom Hashem Hagadol v'Hanor. We can if you want. You are a Bal Musaf after all. Tana v'Shem Rav Meir. Tana b'shem Rav Meir, kol misha kavua. This is an unbelievable Gemara. Kol misha kavua be'eretz Yisrael, u'medaber b'lashon hakodesh, ve'ochel peirosa b'tara, kore kriyashma b'boker u'ba'erev, yehei mevusar sheben olam haba hu. Unbelievable. So the Meforshim have a whole host of ideas here as to what's going on. The art scroll on the bottom quotes, the four elements. You have the guf, and the ruach, and the nefesh, and each one is connected. The whole board here. But from the pashtus of the Gemara, if a person does live in Eretz Yisrael and they speak in Hebrew and they eat the fruits bitara, even when they don't have to be eaten bitara, and they say kriyash boker and erev. So some of this is amazing. There is a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is spoken about in the postgame, and eating your food b'kedusha, that may be a chumrah, but kori kriyash boker va'erev. That's on Psukim and Chumash. Fascinating. So the Muvusar Sheben Olam Haba. Hadron Allah Perak B'Shlosh HaPrachim. Hadron Allah Perak B'Shlosh HaPrachim. Hadron Allah Perak B'Shlosh HaPrachim. Yerusha, which come back to this daf in 7.5 years. Let's start the next parak and move a little bit onto daf.
Be prepared.
I'm always ready. I left my guitar at home. Halacha Aleph. That would be a scene. That would be a scene. Can't do that.
Hey Siri, you're taking 7.5 years to make filming us.
Okay. Halacha Aleph. Masnisa, the Mishnah writes, Hatruma ma hayu osin ba. What did they actually do with the money? What were the line items in the budget? They took the money to be mafresh truma. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'mitzvosav lahafresh truma. What did they do with the money, tachlis? It says the Gemara, lokchin b'tamidin musaf, and obviously they bought the korban tamid. All the musaf, and today's the day we bring the korban musaf. That would have been purchased on the right at the end, right at the beginning of the month of Nisan. V'niskehem, all those korbanos ha'omer, the korban omer, which was just 2 days ago. Which they alechem by shavus, alechem apanim, also by shavus v'chol korbanos hatzibur, all the korbanos hatzibur. Shomrei, also we would pay the guards who were svichim b'shvius. The halacha is that we have to be careful of anything that grows from seeds that were left over. We have to be careful about that. So these guards would make sure that nothing was growing in the fields. They'd get their money from here. Again, it's like your employment line item. So you've got animals X, Shabbos, whatever the korbanos were. Everything was detailed out, and that was you're allowed to spend the money that way. Rabbi Yossi Omer, that really, if you wanted, you don't have to pay those people. That's a real shaila. Because if I want to dedicate my time to the Beis HaMikdash and I say I volunteer to watch the sfichim for free, and I'll make sure that none of this is going to grow. So what about that money? Is that considered okay? So that's a shaila in the Rishonim. And anyways, not everybody agrees. Amrulo, they said to him, Afata Omer she'ein boin. It has to be that the money comes from the tzibur. It can't be someone's private donation. Not every private donation can switch over into something that is for the public, as we've seen a couple of times. We're at right now on the top of Yud Aleph, Aleph, top line. Let's just see the Rashi on the top of the page to give us a little bit of framing. Not Rashi, excuse me. Old habits. Old habits. Wishful thinking. Soon we only have another 11 blot, and I'm counting. It says the Korban Ha'ida on the top line. Dibra Maskal Ma'ro. Amas Nisan the Perik Dala de Tainus. In the fourth parak of Tainus Koi, what does it say over there? Tatan Hasam. Sman Atzia Kohanim de Ha'am Tisha. There were 9 different times that we had this celebratory episode where we would collect wood. What's going on with the wood? So let's see what's going on with the wood. Ma Ra'azman in the Gemara. Ma Ra'azman Atze Kohanim de Ha'am Lehimanos. We got only these 9 particular groups of families. That's what it was. That's what happened. There were 9 families were able to give the firewood, and everybody else, everybody else had to hold off. What was going on there? Ella says the Gemara line 2, when they were coming back to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, they couldn't find any firewood by the Beis HaMikdash Sheni. They looked, they had none. A whole bunch of people said, I have the wood for this. These 9 families. I'm going to dedicate the wood. And they gave it over. And they were the reason why the Beis HaMikdash was able to get up and running right away, because they had all of the wood. You can't have korbanos without wood. Chagai, Zachariah, Malachi, the last 3 Nevi'im that we had, and they were by the time of the second Beis HaMikdash. Even in a time when the lishka of Eitzim is jam-packed, but these Jews who were there in the beginning, and they want to give, the halacha is their wood would always get used first. Oh, very good. So Amar Rav Acha the Rabbi Yosahi. That is the shita of Rabbi Yosa. What does that mean? The Rabbi Yosa Omer Afarot says Misnadeh Shomer Chinam. Now we know why this Gemara is being brought here. Can you give voluntarily for something that is going to be used from a tzibur? Can you give something private, your own time, your own money, and have it count for the tzibur? So our Mishnah had a machlokas in the Tanaim here. So this Gemara, Mishnah and Tainis, which says that we let the 9 families give of their own, that must be like Rav Yosef. That must be like the Shita in our Mishnah that says, Afarotze misnadev shomer chinam. Rabbi Yossi the Amora, B'Shem Rabbi Eloi, Divrei Hakoli, I disagree. Really, when it comes to the wood, when it comes to the wood that's being used for the Beis Hamikdash, everyone would agree that you can volunteer that. Ma pligin, where's the machlokas really fundamentally? Where's the machlokas in our Mishnah? So where did we say that was? We said that was by the case of the Sfichin Shebeshviz. So our Gemara says, Ma pligin, what were they arguing? Begufo shel korban, things that are super direct. But aval b'machshirei korban, the wood is just a machshir of the korban. It's not the korban itself. Kol ama modai shu mishtane korban yachid the korban tzibur. Marimakom number 1. Marimakom number 2. Tani isha she'asas ksones livna shera. Let's say that a woman is a mother is so proud of her son that her son's a kohen. So she hand stitches the beged, the begadim for the kohen. Does that count? Can she make something for the tzibur from her own bare hands? So it says the Gemara, she has to give it over as a gift. Amar Rav Acha, the Rabbi Yossi, this must be the same Rabbi Yossi that we saw about. The Rabbi Yossi Amar, Afarotze misnadev shomer chinam. And what does Rabbi Yossi the Amora say on this Rabbi Yossi the Tana? He says, B'Shem Rabbi La, Divrei Hakoli. I disagree. Maplikin, really, where's their argument? It's not on these ancillary things. It's not on the clothing. Really, the machlokas was only begufa shel korban. Aval b'machshirei korban kol ama modai shumishtana korban yachid the korban tzibur. You're allowed to do that with machshir, and that's not a problem at all. Now, Masnith in our Mishnah doesn't work with this Amora. What was Rabbi Yossi the Amora trying to say? That the wood was a machshir. He said the wood is not the actual korban itself. It's just, one of the things that you can't burn a fire without wood. So the wood is a necessary evil. It's just what it is. You have to have it. So it says the Gemara, a third of the way down on Yudam and Aleph, Masnis and Pli Rabbi Yossi. Because Osan Yamim Noagin B'Shas Korban, B'Shalo B'Shas Korban. We would do these celebratory days, whether or not the Beis Hamikdash stood in a time when there was a korban, and even in a time when there wasn't a korban. Rabbi Yossi Omer Noagin El B'Shas Korban Bilvad. And in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, he said that we still had these celebratory days of these 9 families who got to give the wood, the ode, min hada, and as well from here says the Gemara, the Tanya Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Bei Rabbi Tzadok, Anu Hainu Beis Sanah ben Binyamin. We were one of the families of Bnei Sanah, the son of Binyamin. V'chal Tisha B'Av Lios B'Shabbos, and that year Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos, and their day to bring wood to the Beis Hamikdash was the 10th of Av. But this year Tisha B'Av was a nidche. It was put. We have this Ladina today also. So that Tisha B'Av was on a Sunday. That was their day to celebrate and have a Suda, and they were going to give to the Beis Hamikdash. So what did they do? So obviously the fast was pushed off to Motzei Shabbos. And we did fast a little bit, but we didn't finish our fast. And we didn't finish the fast. We celebrated the day. Haraya, we see that it's that you, Rabbi Yossi Bar Eli, you want to say that it's not really essential. It's only a machshir. You're wrong. It's not only a machshir. We see that the wood that's being used for the fire is a central piece of the process. We're going to stop right here at the 2 dots, almost halfway down Yudam and Aleph. And we'll pick up from here tomorrow night with hopefully another blot and a half plus, and then we'll be caught up so that it can be Friday and we'll be behind again. Wishing you all a beautiful night, a good moment.